Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Squadron Leader Peter Lisney, and in this episode, we look back at 5 years of Inside Air.
I can see what looks like a laser. There's a beam of laser flame, and it's cutting through the right-hand wing, and I can see it. It's actually cut through the wing, and it's moving, and I can see that the wing is probably going to come off in the not-too-distant future.
But you're not allowed to have your assets in any one single place for any more than 1 day at a time. Keep moving. Be a moving target.
You know, that responsibility to use that force, it lies on that individual. So they want you to interject. They want to empower you.
Also, in this episode, we'll reheat a few stories just in case you missed them, and we'll be finding out who is under the hat this week.
What bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
It's got to be taking a proper mug with me, along with a supporting cast of tea bags, especially Yorkshire tea.
Find out who is under the hat at the end of this episode. Now, after 131 episodes and 5,565 minutes of fortnightly content, the official podcast of the Royal Air Force is 5 years old. As you heard in the intro, Inside Air is a behind-the-wire view of the RAF, its people, technology and operations. It's the first and longest running regular podcast in the UK Armed Forces and has got subscribers across the globe. As we celebrate this milestone, we'll tell you how it all started. We'll look back at the top episodes from each of the past 5 years based on the all-time number of downloads, and perhaps see why Inside Air has consistently featured in Apple's Top 100 Technology Podcasts chart. To get things started, we go back to 2021 and Episode 4, Evolution of Fast Jet Ground Attack. Here we hear from former Tornado navigator Flight Lieutenant John Nichol telling F-35 pilot Flight Lieutenant Bally what it's like to be shot down.
So I could see in my right, glanced out, well, because I'm still trying to update the kit, and you're using the radar to update the kit. There's no global positioning system. It's not like your sat nav. This was all.
So you were just INS. Look.
This was inertial navigation.
Yeah.
And if you got that wrong, you were in fearful trouble, especially at night. I'll tell you that story at one point. I mean, if you got that wrong at night, you were in fearful trouble. And Rizzo and the boss nearly had a mid-air collision with somebody whose kit was inaccurate. But so you're using the radar to update the attack system, and luckily the Iraqis had built a massive metal fence around their airfield, and so that stood out like the dog's gonads on a radar, and so we had a really accurate system. So I could see, I could sense a little bit of flak, but at night the guys could see it. During the day, you kind of couldn't see much from the back. At the front, the guys could see puffs of smoke, kind of daytime. You know, if you remember the old World War II films with puffs of smoke going off, they could see that. I could see flares coming out on my right because we were pumping out flares like Billio from 30 feet, because obviously any heat-seeking missiles would easily be able to pick us out. These were the days before any heat-seeking missile were receivers. Bally talked about his radar receiver, and we had that, but we didn't have any heat-seeking missile infrared detectors. So I could see flares going out on my right as somebody climbed up to deliver. We climbed up. There's the most monumental cock-up in our aircraft. You know, almost certainly my fault. The bombs don't come off. And so we're now in a jet, in a Tornado, with 8 1,000-pound bombs on. And in a loft recovery, Bally, because he's a pilot, he's part of the two-winged master race, he would be able to explain this better. But you've got, 30 degree up, the bombs come off, and as they come off, you have to overbank in our case, to your left, and you overbank past what would be vertical. So you've got 135 degree of bank on, so your cockpit is looking down at the sand. You're now near, not quite inverted, 180 degrees would be inverted, but you're near inverted, but you're not meant to have 1,000 pounds of bombs on your backside. So we've still got 1,000 pounds of bombs.
Yeah, God.
Now, JP, thank God, he was actually a pretty half-decent pilot. He managed to recover us. So we get back to low level, and this is kind of quite an important point. We are now kicking the verbal crap out of ourselves. I got it wrong, there's no doubt about that. But we now are ashamed. So this is the very first RAF low-level attack since time immemorial, and I have cocked it up. And so the first thing that we talk about is re-attacking. Now that's an anathema. That's ludicrous. So, but we talk about it for about 2 seconds and decide this is a terrible idea. So I then dump the bombs. I jettison the bombs. So we throw 8 1,000-pound live bombs into the desert, and we're exiting. And JP gets it to low level, and we're back down to 30 feet, and we're heading home at about 30 feet. And probably 2 minutes later, so away from the target, we can see what looks as though it's a communications, little kind of cabins, aerials. I call JP to break away from it, and we go south of it, and then suddenly there is the most monumental bang, and it is like being hit by an express train. And so we're flying along at 30 feet. JP's flying. I'm sitting there, fat, dumb, and happy. We're 30 feet, looking up at blue sky. There is the most monumental explosion, and it's like being hit by I'm looking up the blue sky, flying straight and level. The aircraft suddenly explodes left, and I'm no longer looking up at blue sky. I'm looking up at brown sand at 30 feet. I presume it was the sand that was brown at that particular moment. And the aircraft is completely out of control. Again, JP, my God, he's the only reason we're still alive, gets control of it. We nearly hit the ground, but he recovers it. And then we are now, so in the Tornado, it's all fly-by-wire. Our jet is no longer fly-by-wire. We are now fly-by-pony. All we've got is the most basic metal controls that are connected to 2 main control surfaces, the tailplanes at the back. And we're wallowing around like drunken hippopotamuses. He manages to make sure we don't hit the ground, but we've got a right-hand engine fire, or the hydraulics I can't remember. We've taken AAA anti-aircraft artillery, and the sidewinder on the wing has exploded. And so the sidewinder you carried we had on both wings. Bally will remember the image. And our sidewinder has taken around a bullet from the ground, and it's gone through the missile. The missile has ignited on the aircraft, but it's stuck on the rail. So it's now it's acting like a welding torch. And I look out the right-hand side of the aircraft and the right-hand wing, and I can see what looks like a laser. There's a beam of laser flame, and it's cutting through the right-hand wing, and I can see it. It's actually cut through the wing, and it's moving, and I can see that the wing is probably going to come off in the not too distant future. And there's flames coming from the back where the missile hit. The engine's on fire. The flames are moving steadily to where I sit in the rear seat of the aircraft. And that is then. So we're kind of fighting this for, I'm going to hazard a guess, a minute, 90 seconds. We're trying to basically, we ignore all of the routing, all of the safe corridors. We turn south and head straight for the border. So because we're hoping that we can get away from any Iraqi troop positions. If we can get away from them, we might get rescued if we come out. If we can get across the border, we'll be fat, dumb, and happy. But the flames are now kind of, I can see them in the. We've got rear view mirrors in the Tornado, and I can see them coming towards me, and the whole of the back of the aircraft has gone. There's nothing there. It's just flame, and all I can see is it marching to where I sit. And I said to JP, we got to get out. We put a couple of calls out. I broadcast our position, and that was it. We kind of count down, eject, and we're out. And that was, my war was over. It was the shortest war in the world.
My goodness. What a bit. Wow.
While Inside Air launched in 2021, we first pitched a plan for an RAF podcast in 2018. If you remember, that was the year the RAF turned 100, so unsurprisingly it was a bit busy to try something new. It wasn't until the lockdown restrictions of late 2020 that we were finally given the green light to set up a team to remotely record audio content for the RAF. Fortunately, in 7644 Squadron and RAF Media Reserves, we have some brilliant radio and TV broadcasters, journalists, PR specialists and content creators who could bring their civilian skills to the project. RAF Music Services kindly composed a theme tune, the Air Media Centre designed a logo, and our colleagues in Air Media and Comms ensured the project cleared the admin hurdles and found a home on RAF media channels. Inside Air was born. Now, let's fast forward to 2022 and our second clip. Sometimes our production team are pitched a story and we instantly know it's going to be a hit with listeners. Anything sharp and pointy is always a winner. But back in 2022, I remember receiving a phone call from then Group Captain Nick Britton, who wanted to tell our internal audience about some important changes that were coming to the way careers would be managed. I couldn't help thinking the episode would bomb. Who would be interested in some name changes? How wrong was I? Episode 42, Trades and Branches Out, Professions In, was the most downloaded episode of 2022.
The thing that we have now with their officers and their branches, the enlisted personnel and their trade groups, is what they designed in 1951 for that Air Force, for that society, for that size of Air Force. Back then, we were big in comparison to now. We were hundreds of thousands strong. We were doing national service. We had 30-odd thousand a year joining the service each year. We needed something suitable for mass, rigid, simple, that everyone could understand, and was great for that society. But we're no longer a large Air Force. We're a small Air Force. We need to be nimble. In essence, we need to be agile and flexible about how we use our personnel. And hence, as you say, this journey we're on to move away from those 68 branches and trade groups into 11 new professions.
So this isn't about name change, is it? This is about structure as well. Is that? Am I right?
Oh yes. I think it would be such a mistake to view this as a name change only exercise. Not only am I, with my teams, moving our 68 branches and trade groups into these 11 new professions, if you like, making bigger professions, but I'm baking in the workforce agility and flexibility by allowing our service personnel to serve in the broadest range of roles within their profession, depending on their aptitude and the service need. And I'm not just making bigger blobs of trade groups, because that in itself, of course, wouldn't give you agility and flexibility. There are three other things, Peter, we have to do at the same time to actually deliver this. And the first of those is get after our HR processes. And by that, I mean everything from how we recruit, what it says on our recruiting websites, through to the documentation they sign off when they join the service, 308s and 75s, if you reflect back on your own journey. Then the career pathways they're going to go through, the QRs that they serve under, the APs that describe those career pathways. All of this HR systems have to be reformed as well. And I have Air Commodore Burns as my one-star lead. And moreover, if we're after agility and flexibility, we're going to have to really get after training, because our current training acts, if you like, in many ways as a barrier to agility and flexibility. We front load training. At phase 2, it's long, and in many ways, it's just in case training at phase 2 rather than just in time. I've got to get after what really needs to be done at phase 2 and what can be done later on at phase 3 training, so that the training itself is not the barrier to moving people around the service. Instead, the training could perhaps be done at the workplace. It could be done just in time rather than just in case. And then thirdly, and this is why it's not a name change, perhaps the biggest cultural change for us is we can no longer in our future have these trade groups that are almost viewed by the service as homogeneous, that everyone in that trade group is exactly the same. Instead, when we don't have trade groups, we're going to have to look at our service personnel as individuals with competencies. What can that individual service person do versus what that one over there can do, and manage them by those competencies. And in our future, the competency record that each service person has will be as important to them as their pay record.
One of the great advantages to a podcast is how deep you can dig into a subject. A news item might give you 100 words to work with, a press release probably no more than 500 words, but talk for 30 minutes on a subject and you could have as many as 4,000 words to get your message across. Recently, the production team were thrilled to read the Chief of the Air Staff's LinkedIn post about 2 pilots who joined the RAF after hearing an Inside Air episode. Episodes have also become training resources, and that brings us to 2023's top download. On day 1 of a course at the Joint Services Command and Staff College, things came full circle for me when we were all advised to listen to then Air Marshal Half Smith in episode 64, Agile Combat Employment. ACE.
So to bring the ACE concept to life, a challenge I could set would be to the station commander at Lossiemouth. You are to continue to do QRA North, but you're not allowed to have your assets in any one single place for any more than one day at a time. Keep moving. Be a moving target. Don't sit.
Like a boxer.
Like a boxer. So that, to me, if you think of it like that, that's what Agile Combat Employment is. And the reality is when you really kind of get under the skin of it and say, well, how do we do that? There's a cultural piece. There's a piece around our people being ready to do that, to move around quickly, be agile, be fleet of foot, be ready to go, a readiness and a resilience to it. Back in the day, we would have called that Bergen ready. You know, my first tour, it's taken me I don't know how long we've been going in the podcast. I'm sure someone will have a sweepstake taken on how long it takes me to talk about being a Harrier pilot. But anyway, on my first tour on Harrier Squadron, we were still doing this because it was the
Strike Command.
Yes, and it was the tail end of the Cold War in the early 90s. And we had 2 lockers in work, one for your flying kit and one for your deployment kit. And your deployment kit was packed and ready to go so that if at any stage in work the hooter went, you would go to your deployment kit locker, pick it up, you knew you had everything you needed, and you stepped out the door and you went. And we practiced that quite regularly. It was in our DNA. We've not had to do that since the mid-90s because our role and the adversary has been different, so we've not necessarily had to do it. And we've fallen out of the habit of it, and I think we need to try to get back. So there's a cultural thing around the readiness and the resilience of it. There's also a logistics piece around it, because back in those days, we had all the logistics support to do that. So my first squadron, 3 fighter squadron, brilliant squadron, we had our own MT. We had all our own 4-ton trucks. We had our own little regiment flight that could do force protection just for the squadron. And so it was instead of it being the size of a squadron, it was like twice the size, but it had all these support elements on it. And when that hooter would go, the whole kind of circus would leave, and we'd trundle off into somewhere in northern Germany and live in a forest for a few weeks. And then we'd come back. Now, I'm not saying we need to go and live in forests, but if I were to ask the station commander from Lossie, not to throw him under the bus here, because I'm sure he'd have a good go at it, but I want you to keep doing QRA for the next 3 weeks, but you can't be in any one place for more than 24 hours at any time. That would be quite the challenge.
Before I hit the record button, I often tell interviewees to imagine we're chatting over a drink in the mess. But the topic is so interesting, people sat at the next table start to lean over and earwig on the conversation. Banter is in, abbreviations are out, stay in lane and don't give away any secrets. As you can imagine, with a war-fighting force for operational and personal security reasons, that's OPSEC and PERSEC, there's only so much that can be said on air, and our homework is always checked. One such episode that was scrutinised very carefully before release was a look at the roles of legal and policy advisors on operations. Here's a clip from 2024's top episode. Episode 83, LEGAD and POLAD on Ops, Targeting's Check and Balance.
we also do have set roles, and those roles are enshrined in targeting policy. You have to have a league ad there, you have to have a pol ad there, and therefore that creates the structure in which the commanders naturally calls on you because they know that that's part of the process they need to follow. And I think also they recognise that they hold a lot of responsibility, and ultimately, as we were saying before, we give advice. We don't make the decision, they make the decision. So if they make, they're making decisions on things that are a really big deal and have real life consequences, and they want to be able to feel like they didn't leave any stone unturned, they didn't miss anything, and they consulted all the right people. Because if they didn't, then that's going to be really difficult for them.
How easy is it to raise your voice and say, "Hang on a minute, I don't think this is right"?
Incredibly easy. And I'm genuinely not just saying that, but I think it goes back to what Tess is saying, is that that responsibility to use that force, it lies on that individual. So they want you to interject. They want to empower you. And one thing I'd add to that is that while under the Geneva Conventions, commanders have to have access to legal advice when they're conducting operations. Having a league ad and a pol ad in the actual room is something that is not saying it's unusual, but not every nation does that. I mean, this is a UK requirement, not an international law requirement, and I think that's an incredibly encouraging thing. They're saying we need you, and that I think is the most that makes it easy for me to interject, so to speak.
So when I watch the news at 10 tonight, and if there's been an airstrike somewhere, I can feel confident that this has been thoroughly looked at before it happened. Is that how I should feel? I
think, and Tess, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that most people, if they saw the scrutiny and the policy and the constraints that the UK has in place before any use of force, I think it's a quite impressive thing.
I think it's definitely more than a lot of people would expect. I think that the UK is doing as much as it possibly can to manage what is obviously a dynamic and unpredictable environment, and that is that there's only so much that you can do on operations, because things can happen very quickly. But I think the level of thought and consideration that goes into ensuring there are as many checks and balances as possible, notwithstanding the dynamism, is definitely a lot more than I think the average person would expect when they watch the news.
The regulars and reserves who wear the RAF uniform are just the tip of the spear of today's Royal Air Force. Supporting, training and equipping them are MOD civil servants, contractors and defence industry partners. No episode has demonstrated this interdependence better than the most downloaded episode of 2025, when we heard about the Global Combat Aircraft Programme from Rolls-Royce, Leonardo and the RAF. Inside Air has always had a strong overseas audience, but more than 5% of this episode's downloads came from just within the programme partner countries of Japan and Italy. Here's a clip from episode 113, GCAP, 6th Generation Aircraft.
They will be managing a huge amount of tasks coming in for a very large number of assets, but it's not going to require a superhuman. It's just going to require normal people that we can train in a normal amount of time who are willing to commit themselves to becoming a specialist. It's entirely reasonable.
Are they going to be a pilot or a systems analyst? And is the pilot going to be sat in a container somewhere?
So,
flying remotely?
Well, they definitely won't be remote, and I'll explain that why in a second. But with apologies to my Italian opposite number, because he will not thank me for this, I think we're talking about a single-seat Wizzo, not a single-seat pilot. Like you've said. And I say that as a pilot.
Right, okay.
That's probably going to immediately spike. Well, I'm going to get some
navigator. I'm going to quote you on that, Bill.
So, I'm going to get some hate mail from that one.
But there's a lot of love in this room right now, isn't there?
Exactly. There's some. Well, So, coming back to the inner cabin, I just talked about how deep this aircraft's going to penetrate. So the idea of us being able to guarantee a connection back to outside, that's not reasonable. What I can guarantee is a connection back to the GCAP, that core platform. That's why I call it the quarterback. So we'll be able to maintain, we have to maintain a local network. In fact, I'm going to go back another step again. How do we fight as the allies in the West? Well, we know probably we're going to be outnumbered, yeah? And for a long time, we built a technological edge. And that technological edge allowed us to offset mass. So quality offsetting quantity. If that quality edge is eroded, our next step is it's our tempo. It's the speed with which we can go around our loop. And so in order for us to be greater than the sum of our parts, and that's a phrase we hold at the center of this. F-35 is a great example of this. F-35, when it's a formation, is greater than the sum of its parts. GCAP, but in some ways that F-35 formation is a little bit selfish with the way it does that. With GCAP, sixth generation, where we're heading for is something that's greater than the sum of its parts, but that benefit is shared across the domains, so with maritime, with land, with space, and with other air assets. So it's our ability to connect which is going to be fundamental to our success. And when we're outside of the threat environment, we'll be connected in a very broad, low latency, high speed, high bandwidth way. And as we go in, we'll narrow that down and manage that for our survivability. But the key point is we're always in part connected, but you can't guarantee always that connection back, which is why right now, for the time being, we need a human in that quarterback position. We're prepared, though, for the time when artificial general intelligence does catch up. At the moment, large language models, I mean, they're just a stochastic parrot, yeah? They're advanced autocomplete. Even the reasoning models have got limitations, and they draw an awful lot of server space. I can't even begin to fit that in a platform.
So, I'm going to ask a question now, but you've sort of answered it a little bit, but let's get it out there. Fast air versus drone. One fast air unit could pay for 10,000 drones.
Yeah, and so, but then you've got to ask yourself, those drones have got to be able to penetrate that threat environment to a certain extent. If you're willing to lose a load of them, not so much, but they've certainly got to fly a long way. You probably don't want it to take 15 hours, so you want them to go a bit quicker. By the time you've made your long-range, high-speed, somewhat stealthy or completely expendable drone, you probably end up in a cost point which isn't necessarily where you'd expect. And so there's a balance. And there's a balance to this in all of it. If you want it to be low cost, you really want the sensors to be somewhere else. Maybe in a GCAP. If you want that compute to be somewhere else so they're smart, they're not dumb, you're going to need a server rack in the right place where you can connect to it without getting them killed, because talking too loud can get you killed in a modern threat environment. So you need a server rack there. Maybe that's GCAP as well. So there is absolutely a place for saturation through autonomous and expendable systems. That's definitely one of our 3 S's. Yeah. So we've got stealth, signature. We've got suppression, ECRS Mark II, the Growler. And we've got saturation. You do that. We've done that for years with weapons already, but drones are the new form of saturation. Put those 3 things together and you've got yourself a really nice mix. But if you pick any one antibiotic and just overuse it, what do you breed? Antibiotic resistance. You get yourself whacked by something that's evolved to deal with you. So you need to have a spread.
At the start of every episode, you'll hear the tagline, Inside Air is a behind-the-wire view of the RAF, its people, technology and operations. In the past 5 years, we've heard from some real-life superheroes, marvelled at new technology and taken you behind the wire on operations and exercises across the UK, Europe, the Middle East, North America, Australia and most recently to the South Atlantic. What a journey. Please keep these stories coming. If you're in the RAF and have a story you'd like us to feature or include in our newsreel Reheat, please reach out through your unit media and communications officer. Thank you to all our interviewees, contributors and fixers. Thank you to our talented production team, not just in 7644 Squadron or RAF Media Reserves, but also our regular and MOD civil service colleagues who help with production or who've got behind the mic themselves. Finally, a big thank you to you for listening. Whether you're in the RAF, a veteran, thinking of joining, or just want to stay in touch with what the RAF is doing around the world, we wouldn't be here without you. Thank you for being a part of Inside Air.
Hi, I'm AS1 Emma Kerwin, and this is Reheat, where we take a look at some of the RAF stories you might have missed. The Royal Air Force have carried out strikes on an underground facility occupied by Islamic State in Syria. The MOD revealed Typhoon, supported by a Voyager refuelling tanker, deployed guided bombs on a suspected stockpile of weapons and explosives near Palmyra. No civilians live near the facility. The operation was supported by French aircraft, and Defence Secretary MP John Healey says this action shows UK leadership and determination to stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies to stamp out any resurgence of Daesh and their dangerous and violent ideologies in the Middle East. Next to New Mexico, where the RAF and UK Space Command joined allies for a multinational exercise focused on modern warfare. More than 300 personnel trained in multiple virtual battle space environments, including across air, land and cyber domains. Forces from the UK, US, Canada and Australia took part in exercise Virtual Flag Coalition, hosted by the US Air Force. One aim of the exercise was to test how command and control systems work under difficult conditions, including poor communications and incomplete intelligence. And it's a huge congratulations to all personnel associated with the Royal Air Force who've been recognised in the New Year Honours List 2026. If you'd like to find out who received an award, there's a news article on the official RAF website with a list. That was Reheat for Inside Air.
I'm AS1 Ben Russell, and this is Under the Hat, where we get to know an aviator in less than a minute. Name you're known by.
Hi, I'm Corporal Alex Jessup. I'm a reservist at 602 City of Glasgow Squadron.
What's your profession?
I work as an air and space operations specialist.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best thing so far is really the people. That's what makes it tick, and it's great to meet such a wide variety and diverse population of those regulars and reservists.
Hardest part of your job?
The hardest thing so far has been really choosing which opportunities to pursue. They're so vast.
Best location you've served?
The best place I've worked at has been Lossiemouth. It's an absolutely stunning location, lovely scenery, right on the coast, offers some really good opportunities for outdoor activities such as cycling. Cycling along the coast is absolutely stunning.
What bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
It's got to be taking a proper mug with me, along with a supporting cast of tea bags, especially Yorkshire tea.
And what's your proudest moment in the RAF?
The proudest moment has been I've been awarded the Honorary Air Commodore as a Reservist of the Year award for the squadron. So yeah, happy with that.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.